Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another Testimony Tuesday. Today, I have the privilege of speaking with Shay Thomas. Shay and I have been friends since high school, and our relationship is pretty dynamic now that we're in similar seasons of just trying to grow and focus on what God wants us to do. It's just been an interesting perspective of us trying to figure out what that looks like in our lives, but then also in our relationships. And so, Shay, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining me. I'm excited.
I'm excited. It'll be fun.
Yeah. What would you say is your most influential relationship in your life in this season?
I would probably say if I had to just pick one person, the most influential person or influential relationship that I've grown to love more and more daily is the relationship I have with my mom. She's kind of like my best friend. I go to her for everything.
What do you feel like you contribute to that relationship?
My mom's mother passed away when she was a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
And so for her, the relationship that I have with her, she feels that I kind of feel a void that she has, missing her mother and not really having any sisters or any women per se on her side of the family. So just, being a friend, somebody that she can lean on and talk to about even things that she's going through. Really beneficial, the fact that, we don't only have that mother-daughter relationship. It's actually, friend, sister type relationship. So
How do you two questions. How do you set the standard for relationships, but then how does your relationship with your mom influence how you do relationships with other people?
It's been a struggle.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't always known how exactly to set standards in relationships. And that's something that I'm working through daily. Just for example, I'm going through a season of fasting right now, and my focus is relationships. And so this season has actually given me a little bit more guidance on how to understand which relationships are God-driven and which ones are just kind of doors that God is trying to close that I'm just hanging on to.
Mm-hmm.
But the relationship I have with my mom has actually assisted me with building other relationships in the sense that, it teaches me love. It teaches me how to love people in spite of, meaning that, I would say like now I'm actually learning that love and relationships and people being in my life, it truly has to be unconditional. I can't say I love you or I care for you, but it has to be, this in spite of, even though we're going through X, Y, and Z, I still want to be there for you. I still care about you. I'm just going to pray us through this situation. So.
Yeah. Because it's the same thing in our relationship with God. Like, God doesn't come to us and say, I love you if you do X, Y, Z, or I love you,
right.
But it's an unconditional feeling. It's an unconditional grace that we receive. And so our relationships then have to reflect our relationship with God in terms of how we love others.
I feel like we were created by God for relationships.
Absolutely.
He definitely gives us direction for our relationship and everything like that. And I feel like it's through this season I've experienced, different situations, and I always have in the back of my head, as long as I honor him in every relationship that I have, there shouldn't be any type of discrepancies or anything like that. So
yeah, I think it just takes a lot of humility and a lot of grace when you are giving those parts of yourself to other people. Like, you have to, I think you have to know your worth and then know what you're willing to receive from someone and what you're willing to give. Talking about that makes me think of expectations. What would you say are your expectations in relationships?
Again, through this season, I'm kind of learning that I shouldn't go into relationships with certain expectations. Just in the sense that not only will I likely get my hopes down, but my expectations for relationships might not exactly match the expectations God has for my particular relationships. It's hard, but I'm learning not to go into relationships having particular expectations and just, praying about God leading the relationship to where he sees fit.
Well, let me clarify that. I think that that is a great answer and that's a great standard to practice. But when I say expectations, I more so mean like, what do you expect to receive from people? So for me, I would say I expect, and when I say this, I think that you have to be willing to give what you're expecting from someone. So this is a working list, it's not a perfective list. Um, so I would say grace, um, consistency, honesty and integrity. Um, I would definitely say God is a foundation, because if you don't know God and you don't know um, what his expectations are for you, then how can you know what his expectations are for this relationship? And so I would also add maybe kindness. I think that's a really big thing for me in this season of life, is learning how to be kind to people, but then also learning how to receive kindness with like an open mind and open heart. Because I think for me personally, I'm more kind to others than I am to myself. And so I think it's helpful when you have people around you that are um, intentional about being kind to you in whatever way that looks like for them. And so I think that in and of itself helps me then turn to be kind to myself, because I'm receiving that kindness um, with an honest and open heart.
I guess for me, of course, honesty, integrity, typical
Mm-hmm.
things of that nature, but I'm also learning that commitment
Mm-hmm.
and time together are big ones to me. Um, Simply because I don't know, I get back to time together probably is one of my love languages. And whether it's, talking on the phone or texting for a few minutes, catching up daily, I feel like it's important for me to let people know that they are a priority in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't just pick and choose, when to be there for them, to check on them, things like that. I feel like it's also important, um, in any relationship, for people to understand that they are a priority, for me, whether it's, letting go of self for a few minutes to make sure that
Mm-hmm.
they're good and make sure that they don't need anything from me, to let them know that I'm fully committed to them and what they have going on in their life at that particular moment.
Yeah.
I will say for me personally, I have a hard time expressing exactly what I need out of relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that's truly being worked on a daily with me. Um, Not in the sense that I expect people to know and understand up front,
Mm-hmm.
without me saying anything. It's just hard. I guess being in the field that I'm in, I'm a social worker, so it's hard for me to kind of put myself on the forefront and, let others know my intentional needs, and things of that nature, going into relationships. But with that being said, I've learned too that, taking things daily and understanding that, relationships are truly either seasonal, lifelong, or, you know, for lessons to be learned.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that because, in the relationships that I've gone through and the season that I've been in my life, I've had to learn, on various occasions that, sometimes God closes doors and we're not ready for them to be closed. And the only way to get through that is to genuinely pray about it and
Mm-hmm.
continue to work through it. Like, okay, what are you trying to teach me, God, in this season?
Yeah.
What can I learn from this particular situation? How do I get through this? And I can say that a lot of times those particular relationships have been relationships that have not had God at the forefront of that relationship. So,
I think for me, those are the hardest, because um, I would say I'm a giver, and I normally put other people before myself. And so it's hard when you have invested this time and you've invested these emotions and these um, like you've grown through this, and then you just have to like let it go.
mm-hmm.
And so I think it's coming to terms with the fact that, like, hey, this was a really good relationship. We had a lot of good times together, but this is not something that I need to bring with me to the next season of my life. Um,
Right.
and I think that that's just because I hold on to things so hard. Like I'm just like, I met this person and they're like a really great person and they bring so much to my life, but I can't seem to see the other side of, hey, this is what it looks like if you actually let them go and receive those lessons and then begin to implement them in other areas of your life.
When you say that, it kind of brings me back to our friendship even, because I can recall a time where we were there, and we were on two totally separate spectrums of life at the moment, and us being the people that we are, don't really talk about things that we're going through in the moment and what we're particularly needing out of relationships. And it took us some time to kind of grow our separate ways, and then God ultimately brought us back together. And I feel like, when you're able to do that, and you're able to sacrifice yourself in order to meet the needs of, the people that you're going to build relationships in, or with, it truly says a lot about not only who you are as a person, but what that relationship basically means to you.
Yeah. But I also think it says a lot about your faith, because you have to have faith to know that, hey, this is for me, or hey, it's not for me. And, whether it is or it isn't, I'm going to be faithful and be obedient, and allow God to kind of just lead that relationship where he says it needs to go.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree with that.
How would you describe the dynamic over the last 10 and a half years? That's a long time.
Yeah. So I feel like because it has been 10 years, of course, we have gone through so many seasons of life. Granted, we met in high school, and in high school, everything was all fun and games every single day. We didn't really have any, real life, lessons that were being taught at that particular time. And so, we're just kind of going with the flow and letting things be. But I would say, in the season of college and life after college, that's really when dynamics started to change. And I think through those dynamics, we've just learned to put our, more so because we've grown in Christ through this season, and we've learned to put, Christ at the forefront of our relationship. And that to me has been the most influential thing, because before, we didn't sit down and just talk about God and what he was doing in our life. And I think the minute we brought that into our relationship was the minute that things started to, okay, this is generally a relationship that God sees fit for my future. This is a lifelong relationship.
There's two parts to it. The first part is we didn't know who we were as individuals, right? And so with that, if you don't know who you are, you don't know what you have to offer. I can't say to you, hey, my love language is physical touch. I like hugs and, sitting close together on the, whatever that looks like, because I don't know that. I don't recognize that within myself. Or you can't say, my love language is quality time. I want to hang out together. But then I also think it is also about getting to know the other person and genuinely being able to accept them for who they are, but then also being willing to meet them where they are. I think a lot of times my issue was I was trying to change you to be me. And, I think there were times where I would give you advice and then you wouldn't take the advice, and I'd be like, I would get mad. I'm like, now that I'm older, I'm like, you can't get mad because someone doesn't want to, do what, she's not your puppet. You can't control her, make her perform. But I think that really taught me the value of friendship, because you're your own individual person and I'm my own individual person. And even though you value my opinion and my input, you don't have to listen to it. It's just a perspective. And so I've learned now to give my opinion if it's asked for, or if I feel genuinely called to give that opinion, I'll say, hey, do you mind if I share my insight with you? Or do you mind if I give you this perspective that I have? Because there's obviously times where God is saying one thing to me that he may not be saying to you, and he may only be wanting me to give you that piece of insight. But I think that for me was not just in this relationship, but in a lot of, I think for this relationship, it was the most dynamic because you and I have that dialogue more so than other relationships that I have. A lot of the other relationships are just open conversations more so than hey, what do you think about this? And so I think this was probably the relationship that opened my eyes to seeing that just because someone doesn't respond or do what you want them to do doesn't mean that they love you any less. doesn't mean that they care about you any less, doesn't mean that they value your input any less. That just means that what you said to them was not right for them in that season that they're in.
I guess so. I don't know if you remember, but there would be times, again, it's probably like years ago, where I would always say, I feel like I have different sets of friends for different seasons, or not seasons, but different aspects of my life. How would you say that you feel about that now? Because I still feel like I can go to this friend for this thing, or I can go to this friend for this thing, but it's based solely upon like I guess we would say dynamic, or the relationship that I have with that particular person. So do you feel now that like you have different sets of friends or like different friends for different things in your life?
I would say it has a lot to do with the foundation you've developed with that person.
Okay.
So if that foundation was not set on what you're needing from that person, I don't think that person can then begin to give you those things until you guys begin to stretch that relationship in that way. I think there have been seasons where I could only go to some people for certain things and other people for other things. But I think now where I am, I think a lot of my relationships are pretty consistent across the board.
I agree with you where I say like the season that I'm in right now and the relationships that I have in my life are relationships that probably are all lifelong. And for each of those relationships, they've been relationships that I've learned to grow and love with these individuals. And they're all individuals that I could probably call on about, anything. I feel like, we all have that relationship, not only together, but the relationship with Christ. And so kind of like our relationship, we've learned to put Christ at the forefront of our relationships and kind of just build on that and have him to kind of lead and direct our relationship in the way that he sees fit.
Yeah.
I think that prior to being where I'm at now and having that thought process of, I can only go to this friend for this and this friend for that, was kind of the lack of not only self-awareness, but the lack of Christ, not really knowing who he was. I've always known who Christ was, but not really having that personal relationship with him, not really devoting my time with him. And because of that, it kind of showed up in the relationships that I was dealing with at the time.
Yeah, I think that just goes back to the statement I made about making sure that is your foundation in every. So if that's your foundation in your life, then you can then implement that foundation in your relationships that you have,
Right.
and allowing that to be what propels that relationship forward, or what even ends that relationship. I think that you just have to know what that looks like for you in terms of having that relationship with God, and then allowing God to lead the other relationships within your life.
I feel like daily, as we grow older, the more we see Christ, the more we learn about him intentionally, the more the dynamics of our relationship will change. I mean, we're humans. We're changing daily. And I feel like we kind of have to grow in the season that he sees fit. If my friend's going through this, or she's in the season of her life, I have to be able to understand that and work through that with her. It's not just something that, I met this person 10 years ago, our relationship's going to be the same all 10 years of the relationship, because that's not how it works.
Yeah.
I'm changing, she's changing, and I have to learn to work through those life changes. But most importantly, as long as you have Christ at the center or the head of that relationship, there shouldn't be anything, if the relationship, is truly Christ seeking, there shouldn't be anything that he won't allow you guys to get through. So.
Yeah, amen. I would definitely agree with that. Wow. What would you say you need from me in this season of your life in terms of like being your friend?
Honestly, I feel like, like the relationship that we have now is genuinely like one of the most cherishable relationships that I have. Just because, again, it has been 10 years and it has been something that we've grown through.
Yeah.
And I feel like both of us have had absolutely amazing journeys and walks with Christ over the last year and a half, 2 years. And I feel like it genuinely shows up in our relationship. Like, we don't have to talk every day.
Mm-hmm.
We don't even have to talk every week. But the second I call you and say, hey, Jazz, like, I've got X, Y, and Z going on. Or, hey, Jazz, like, I just needed to hear your voice in this second. Like, we're there for each other, and we can pray about it and move on. And then it can go another 2 weeks, and it's still the exact same. Whereas before, if we didn't talk for 2 weeks, it's like, oh, like, she's mad at me, or, oh, we're not friends anymore. Like,
we were so immature.
Sorry.
No, that's beautiful. Wow. Thank you for saying that. Because I think that at least maybe like in the last season and moving into this season, I'm learning that when I am my most authentic self, I don't always recognize the impact that it has on other people. And so as I'm growing older, I'm obviously learning more about myself. I'm learning how to be more true to myself. I'm learning how to accept myself for the way that God made me. And so I'm not always aware of the impact that I have on other people with just being who I am, you know, like not saying I need to change from them, or not saying like I need to do X, Y, and Z to meet their standards, but more so saying like, I'm going to take the best version of myself and I'm going to give it to them every chance I get. And so hearing you say that really just kind of affirmed in me that, you know, like what I have to offer is enough. Like what I give people, because even if it's like you said, even if it's just a text message, when we focus on being ourselves, loving yourself for who you are, and just embracing that and trying to live that out in the best way possible, people are impacted far greater than you could ever imagine.
What would you say?
I know there's times where you text me, you're just like, hey, I was thinking about you. Or, you know, I would say if that happens, like just letting me know. Also just like random check-ins, like, hey, you know, how are you actually doing? Because I think a lot of times for me, someone will ask me that and I'll say, oh, I'm fine, I'm doing well. But I never go into detail. I never say like, I had a really bad week, or I'll never say like, oh, I'm having a really great week, or, you know, I don't go into detail. So I think having someone that presses me and forces me to actually acknowledge, like, how are you feeling in this moment? Like, what's going on? Why do you feel this way? I think that would kind of help me in this season.
So do you feel like, because I know oftentimes when I do text you, I'm like, hey, Des, what's up? Like, how are you? And you do say, I'm doing good, or I'm doing well. So maybe in this sense, like, would it be helpful if I like reworded the question, and that way, like, you're kind of forced to answer it?
I would say either rewording it, or when I say like, I'm well, I'm good, maybe saying like, what does that mean? Or, you know, what does that look like for you? Yeah,
that's understandable.
Because I think that's the way that I cheat out of actually like expressing how I feel.
That's something I'll definitely agree to work on.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I think you have to walk in your gifts. You have to know who you are and what you give and what you bring to the table as a friend, as a coworker, as a sister, as a daughter, you know, all those things. And so I think learning those things really helps you have success in all your relationships. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this Testimony Tuesday as much as we did. I hope that you'll join us next week. And until then, don't forget to keep on
going with them.